We are reading less than ever. A sad but true statement. It doesn't take a lot of digging to discover why. In today's attention economy, where everything is fighting for our attention. If you search reading on the internet, there are hundreds of articles indicating that we are reading less than we have ever read before. The data seems to back up this claim. Question is less why for me, and how we start changing that narrative for ourselves and future generations. In this video, I'd like to not just focus on the why, but practical steps in order to nurture a sustainable connection with literature and books. The National Geographic says that the average attention span has shrunk to under 40 seconds. They are dire numbers, and my hope with this video is to help you and guide you back to a place where you can read for a little bit longer, reclaiming some of that attention, ditching some of that social media time, ditching some of that watch time, and replace that with something that is nurturing, sustainable, and filling. Because reading isn't something that we simply do. Reading is a pathway that connects us with each other. Dr. Seuss said, "The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go." Why I feel reading matters. For me, reading is thinking, reflecting, and connecting. More practically speaking, as a former teacher who spent time in a classroom, not only getting a first-hand view, but tangible evidence of what reading allows us to do, and how to shift someone's relationship with reading. I want to share a small personal story. In 2021, I was a grade 4 classroom teacher. During that time, I had a class that didn't like reading. Their relationship with reading was already severed at 10 years old. And so my big focus for the year was to make these students readers. They did the work. I just put in the practical steps in place that allowed them to start taking those steps. I put in the foundation and the structure, and they built the building. But what amazed me during that time more than anything else was that in improving their reading, they improved across the board. In their mathematics, in their English, in their science, in their speech, in their relationships, their empathy, how they connected with the world. And in young people, you can see that tangible change in front of your eyes if you were there for long enough. Whilst also in real time, seeing them have joy and connection and love and this encompassing thing that allows them to travel through the world. That is why I think reading matters. That is why I think it's important. That is why I am making this video. Reading nourishes our capacity for attention, reflection, and empathy, whilst also providing us with insight into not only ourselves, but the world. And a quote I come back to time and time again is by James Baldwin. And it says, "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read." And I think truthfully, more than anything else, reading provides us this vessel to be a lifelong learner. With a few other mediums sprinkled in, reading is still the purest form to learn someone's experience, to connect with someone's experience, and to share someone's experience. So let me share a few practical steps that you can take to begin your reading journey, starting small. Reading 15 minutes every day. For me, what I have always done is set a timer for 5 minutes. I hit start, I open my book, and I read for the 5 minutes. Often what I find is 5 minutes is enough to get me engrossed in the activity if all of my focus and attention is on that activity. When that 5-minute timer goes off, there is no pressure to continue reading. You can put down your book if you're not feeling it, but more times than not, you'll be ready to continue reading. As I've got more experience as a reader, I've set that timer to higher increments, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. And that is usually enough to keep me locked into that activity whilst that timer is on. Spending 15 minutes reading each and every day gets you through a book a month. And over the course of the year, that ends up being almost 10 books. If you can up the ante and turn it into 30 minutes, it's a book every couple of weeks. If you can up the ante and spend an hour reading each day, that turns into a book a week, give or take, depending on the length of the book, depending on what you're reading and the style that you're reading. But starting small has those elements that allow you to, practically speaking, fit that into your day. Whether it's 10 minutes as you eat your breakfast, whether it's 15 minutes before you go to bed, whether it's on your lunch break at work, taking a book everywhere you go, and just having that in case you get that opportunity. Having the book to replace the scrolly scroll feels powerful and significant. For me personally, I like to read first thing in the morning, always have. It is my time that I allot myself. I'll get up, I'll make a coffee, I'll plonk myself on the couch, and I will tend to read for 30 minutes to an hour depending on the day. At the moment, I've been trying to read during my work lunch breaks if I have the opportunity, and I will try again in the evening if I can slot it in. But more often than not, I'll have days where I just read for a 15-minute period of time, and that's enough to keep that habit moving forward. It's enough to keep those pages turning in your books and stop yourself from going stale. Which leads me into my second practical cornerstone, is frequency. You want to be making sure that you are frequently reading, whether it's first thing in the morning, throughout your day, or in the evening. Frequency matters. Frequency is important. If you go 4 days without reading a book, it is harder to pick it up on day 5 than if you read it just yesterday. The second part to frequency is time. As you build up your frequency, can you spend more time in that focus energy reading that book? Whether you're setting that timer, whether you're taking yourself out for a coffee and just sitting there and reading your book as you're drinking your coffee. There are so many different variations of doing this, but frequency and time truly matter when you're trying to build a habit, at least in the initial stages. The biggest focus for me is building small and slowly building up in those frequent increments, building up the time over the days, the weeks, the months. Bringing me to my next one, book choice. Book choice matters more than you think. Often when we begin something, we often want to dive right in at full force. This happened quite often as I was a classroom teacher, and kids would try to pick the hardest books on the top end of their limits, often finding it too challenging, bored, putting down the book and not returning to reading. Book choice matters. I have 3 things that I think about when I'm picking book choice. Am I interested in this book? Am I going to find it fun? Am I interested in the topic enough to want to read an entire book on it? The second, is it in my reading ability? Is it within that skill level? And am I being honest with myself? Because if I'm trying to read a book that is well past my reading ability, particularly when I'm beginning my reading journey again, whether I'm picking up a book for the first time in a few years, or I'm picking up a book for the first time since I finished school or university or whatever that might be. You often see people gravitate towards the classics and they pick up Moby Dick or The Great Gatsby or Crime and Punishment, whatever that might be. Consider, is it in your reading ability, and is it something that you're going to be able to turn the pages, particularly as you are regaining this habit? Because as Zadie Smith says, when you practice reading and you work at a text, it can only give you what you put into it. It's an old moral, but it's completely true. We're trying to build the habit. We are trying to become readers again. Make it fun, keep it light to begin with, and then you can progress into those next stages. And the third and final thing that I consider when I'm choosing my book, and this is not necessarily a must, but this is just something that I know has worked for the students that I've taught and worked for me, but picking books that have white spaces on the page. We want to make sure that those pages turn a little bit quicker. We want to make sure that we get into the flow of the story and the book and the pacing and are able to turn some pages, because the way to build a habit, at least for me in my experience, is building that momentum. And if we can turn a few pages and feel good about those pages whilst also getting pulled into that story. It makes it just that little bit easier. Now let's talk variety. Variety comes in a whole bunch of different shapes and sizes. I think we often get caught up, particularly with reading in one genre, but there are just so many different options and there are so many different opportunities within reading. You can read essays, you can read non-fiction, you can read memoirs, you can read fiction. And what I've often found to bridge those gaps, having different books on the go does help a lot of people. I usually have a fiction over here and a non-fiction over here, and I'm reading them simultaneously. So when I get a little bit stuck or a little bit bored with one, I swap to the other. And that is usually enough to get me unstuck, to freshen it up and make it feel good for me. Another thing I've used extensively over the years is audiobooks. I will use audiobooks particularly for non-fiction and memoirs. The storytelling is incredible, the way they share it, and whether it's going out on a run or doing the dishes at home or whatever that might be, it's a really great way to get a little bit more reading into your everyday and to be immersed in learning and story. At the moment, I'm reading 3 different things. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, that's my fiction book for the month. Bob Brown, Defiant, it's a book about essentially defiance and activism, and that's my non-fiction. And the final one is more of an informative book on the craft of editing. And I use all 3 as a variety to not get bored and stuck on one book. Sometimes you love being stuck on one book, and just being involved with one book is everything that you need at that time. But other times it's nice to have choices. Which brings me to my final practical piece of advice here. Joining a community. That seems rather daunting, and I get it. But reading is a shared act that we connect through reading. We connect through the stories that are told to us. We reflect on those stories, and being able to hear different people's opinions and thoughts on those stories really allows you to be lit up and engaged and excited, and that is what we're here for. Whether it's a book club that you meet weekly or monthly with a couple of friends, or a community-driven book club, whether it's being on a community app like Storygraph, or even platforms like Instagram and TikTok and BookTube allow this community to talk about books and to talk about the things that we're reading and we're loving and sharing. You can also have that engagement. I have that kind of relationship with my mum where I talk about books with my mum, and that's a big part of what we talk about on our phone calls. I also work in a bookstore, so I am talking about books each and every day, and that is a pretty filling experience. I say all that to say that joining community and having someone to share the books that you connect with is a really powerful way to keep you engaged in this habit and to continue reading, particularly if you were just beginning. Anyway, they are some practical tips on how to start reading again and how to build a sustainable reading practice around whatever your life is. I know we are all busy, and I know that we are having our attention pulled into all of these different directions. I know that we have families, I know that we have commitments and jobs and kids and everything else. But reading is one of the most powerful things that has come into my life, and it has shaped everything that I do. And I know how powerful and important it is for our future. I will also state that the amount of books that you read in a year doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. It shouldn't matter to you. What we are trying to achieve is reading that feels good to us. Whether it's 1 book a year or 100 books a year, it really doesn't matter. But did you enjoy it? Did you feel nourished by it? Did you feel involved and connected with the story? Did it make you think about something different? Did you connect with it differently? That's what I think the power of reading is. That is what matters. So ignore the numbers, ignore the stats, but just know that the numbers don't matter that much. Hopefully those practical tips help you build a sustainable reading practice of some kind. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on this video here, and if I can help you in any way, shape or form when it comes to your reading. Anyway, thank you for tuning in this week. I will see you back here in the next one.